Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the She Finds Joy podcast. I want to thank you for pushing play today. And before we get started, I just want to remind you, I know you heard the little intro commercial, but I want to remind you that one of the things that's really, really helpful to me is if you can go into your podcast app and leave us a review. That just kind of helps us circulate and get the word out and help others find us. So thanks for being here with us today. I am really excited to introduce you to our guest today. Her name is Amanda Thebe, and she is a force of nature for women who are experiencing menopause hell and want to start feeling healthy and fit in their 40s and beyond. With over 20 years of experience in the fitness industry, Amanda is a highly regarded expert on women's fitness and health. A popular guest on podcasts and online summits, she brings a refreshing humor and no-nonsense approach. You all know I love that. To subjects usually shrouded in shame. I am so excited to have her on today's podcast. And first and foremost, I know she hears this a million times, but like you're just going to love listening to her voice because she's from England. Welcome, Amanda.
I can literally say anything and people buy it, it's like
I know.
it gives me like an extra step up the ladder, and it never worked in the UK, especially because I'm from the north of England. And I think that, there was always the perception that the northerners were more common. And I remember my dad saying to me when I was young, you're going to have to like refine your accent a little bit, because he was from the south. And I was like, well, screw you. I'm never going to refine my accent now. And then coming over here, like every time I speak, people go, oh my God, say that again.
Yeah, it's just beautiful. It's just so soothing. I have a couple of friends from England, one of which who lived in the Midwest for about 10 years. And so you're just kind of making me a little nostalgic just hearing your voice. So the way that I found you, Amanda, is actually through my good friend Alex Ellis's Body Nerd show. And I was listening to Alex's episodes, and you were talking about this idea of thriving during menopause, and you were giving like the best tips for strength training, and you were talking about hormones. And so I was like, I really just loved your rawness and your realness. And so then I jumped over to your podcast and was listening to different episodes. I especially like the one with Courtney Townley, because she was talking about grit and grace, and how we can show compassion to ourselves and kindness, but also show up and kind of do the work that we need to do. So that's for all our audience members. That's how I found you. But I want you to kind of just do your own little intro and tell us who you are and what you do.
That's great. Yeah, I didn't realize that, because I didn't record my podcast now for 18 months, 2 years, but it still gets a valuable number of hits because the content is evergreen. And it's actually why I keep it up there, because I've had some people that know a lot more about stuff than I do. And, we have to be continually learning. I mean, it's part of the showing up thing that you've just said, right? You can't show up unless you're willing to evolve. That's how I feel about everything. And so I've been a fitness trainer since my early 20s, so it's decades now. Like I just turned 50 this year, so like nearly 30 years. Yeah, I know. Wow. I'm going for colonoscopy on Friday, so yay for being 50.
Yes.
Oh my God. And so being in the fitness industry is one of those worlds where sometimes I feel a little bit jaded being in it, because there's lots of gimmicks and lots of false information out there in the wellness industry in general. But I've sort of always forged my own path and followed people that I really respect in the industry. And then I've done certifications from organizations that I feel are true to the science and to what we know to work. And so I feel that when people follow me, they follow me because I come from a real genuine place. I'm not afraid to say that things have gone wrong for me. I'm not afraid to say I've made mistakes, but I always say, what I believe to be true right now. And so when I came into my 40s, I think around about 42, I was like, we were talking just prior to the show, you were saying, you run 30 miles a week and you feel amazing, you feel youthful. Well, that was me going in my 40s. I was like, poster girl for the 40-year-old. I feel good and healthy and strong. And And I actually just was completely content. You know, that I wouldn't change much in my life. I was so content. And then by the time I came to 42, I started to feel unwell. And then for 2 years, I struggled with vertigo, nausea, and it turned out that that was from migraines. And then I also had depression. And these are things I'd never experienced before. And I spent those 2 years having multiple numbers of tests, seeing specialists, doctors who genuinely wanted to help me, but never got to like the root cause of what was going on. And I literally thought I was losing my mind. In those 2 years, I was like, I don't feel well. I can barely function. My quality of life has disappeared. My relationship with my husband and my children, my friends is all being impacted. I wasn't showing up because I couldn't. Like, I was in this really low place in my life, and it was scary, frustrating, isolating. And the reason it was that bad was because not just from the symptomatic side and even just the mental health aspect, I wasn't getting any answers. I wasn't actually being informed by any of my medical team, of which there was, I think, 6 specialists, what the hell was going on. In fact, they just kept saying, we can see you're not well, but we don't know why. And then I went to my annual gynecology, annual checkup, and he straight away said, you don't look okay. Are you okay? Bring on the waterworks. Because of course I started crying because somebody actually cared and wanted to listen. And cut a long story short, he basically said, these are symptoms of perimenopause. They're valid. These are not, I see these every day in my workplace. You're not alone. I can help you. And the first thing I said was, well, what's perimenopause? Like, I've never heard of this word before. Like, and going back 8 years, I hadn't heard the word before. And so that took me down this perimenopause rabbit hole, menopause rabbit hole. And I started talking about it from a fitness and wellness perspective, not from like a clinical medical side, but from, this is me, N=1. I'm doing this experiment. Like, does anybody else feel the same way? And I just got flooded with women saying, I feel the same way and I need help, and what can I do? And so I created a community on Facebook and a podcast, and I've just released my book in October. So I have all of these like different resources now, and the pure purpose of doing all of this was to create a community space to help women feel validated and less isolated, and then to give them the education to be able to make choice. Because in those 2 years, if I had had the information, I don't think I would have felt quite as desperate. If I could have said, this is perimenopause and there are active things you can do to feel better, I would have done them, right? Like most of us would.
Yes. It's the unknown, right? It's when like our brain can't logically attach any kind of reason to why we're experiencing these symptoms. I am somebody who has suffered throughout my life from panic disorder. And I said, like, the thing that's scary about panic attacks is that, it's not as if a car has almost ran me over or someone has a knife to my throat. It's that I have those feelings and then I'm just sitting in my home or I'm walking through the grocery store. And so since my brain can't attach a logical reason to it, then I start to become desperate and think I'm crazy. And so it sounds like you just could not attach all of these feelings and symptoms to anything other than I must be losing my mind.
Well, I mean, in the fitness world especially, it's never spoken about ever. In fact, the opposite. You hear these old men who seem to run the fitness world saying, well, women just need, as they get older, just to keep doing the same thing. There's no difference, no physiological differences. And I'm like, screw you. There completely is. And you're missing a big part of the puzzle. So, yeah, I mean, the fact that we have to actively dig to find any basic information that's not one from the pseudoscience world, because the alternative health world have run with this and they're giving information to women that's really just not valid. It's confusing and it leaves women going, well, what am I supposed to do? How can I balance my hormones? Well, listen, you just need to know what's happening. You need to find a medical specialist. You need to have a good grasp of what is happening in these years leading through perimenopause to postmenopause, so that you can actually make choices that are relevant and active for you, instead of like having to dig deep all the time. And then, a lot of women like you who were predisposed to like panic attacks, anxiety, and depression find that those symptoms just increase in perimenopause. And I've only had 2 anxiety attacks and literally thought I was dying. Luckily, my oldest son, who is actually on the autism spectrum, who is really high functioning, like hyper intelligent, has been in therapy for years, and he saw it and recognized it and sat me down and made me do deep belly breaths and tried to, he knows cognitive behavioral therapy. So like, it sort of made me realize that, maybe I can't control the panic attacks if it's because my estrogen and progesterone are falling. Maybe that's something I actually can't control, but what I can control is the outcome of where this anxiety or panic attack is going to take me.
Yes,
Right.
exactly. So I want you to take us back to the 2 years of a period where you were experiencing all of these symptoms. And I want you to get really specific with my audience. Like, I know you talked a little bit about depression and you just couldn't hardly function, but give me examples. What did a typical day look and feel like to you back then?
Yeah, it was awful. And, so prior to me feeling unwell, I just started my fitness business, right? I've done it for decades, but I got to the point in time where, mums at the school were like saying, please train me, please start a class. And I had like 70 clients by this time. So I'd only been going a year with my fit and chips business. And it was like-minded women were coming to me. And so I would get up in the morning, have a few early morning clients before the children got up. I'd go to people's houses for personal training. Then I would have 2 back-to-back small group training classes. And then afterwards, we were a very social group. We'd go for coffee in the place. It was in this beautiful old building with a coffee shop. So we'd spend like an hour and a half talking afterwards. And then I'd do afternoon clients, pick the kids up from school, make dinner. I had one of those like typical work lives where I worked for myself and I juggled lots of balls in the air. And I had a husband, I should say. I haven't got rid of him.
Yeah, you still have him. You haven't gotten rid of him.
He's downstairs. Yeah, I have a husband who is an executive in a bank and he works really long hours. And so I just can't expect him to be as hands-on as he would like to be. So the dinner was down to making me and with me and my young children. Like I would stop working just to, spend a couple of hours with them and then work again on an evening, writing articles and, planning programs for my clients. And so I had like I say, I was content, I was happy. And then I actually remember the day it happened. I went to a boxing class because I used to do martial arts as a kid. I was a black belt in karate and I just like hitting things. It just makes me feel good. So I went to this boxing class and it was brilliant. And I went home and I was like, gosh, I just don't feel right. I don't feel well. So I thought, I wonder if I've picked up a bug, or I wonder if I've just pushed too hard. Those times when you push too hard and you just feel a bit like exhausted, but you can't work out why. So I went to bed. Then when I woke up ready to get the kids from school, the room was spinning. And I tried to get out of bed and I fell over and I kept falling over. So, and then I got a wave of nausea. So I crawled on my hands and knees to the bathroom and puked my guts up. And then over the next couple of days, I started losing feeling in my face, feeling down one side of my body. And I literally could barely function. Someone had to pick the kids up from school. I canceled my clients and I was just like, what the hell's going on? Maybe it's a virus. Maybe it's just, I've done too much. I've got a virus or something. And it eventually cleared up, but then it happened again. And then again and again, and it just wouldn't stop. And it was one of those things that I'm really good at logging and I record everything, right? So I thought, I'm going to write this down just to see if there's a pattern. There was no pattern. I couldn't even say like, oh, this is happening like 3 times a month. It was just happening randomly. And I remember flying to New York to do a certification for this Ultimate Sandbag. I'm a master trainer for them. And it was a 2-day course and it was super intense. And I met a friend there who I'm still really good friends with. She's reading the book and she said, I remember when you came to this course and you said you felt sick and you kept running to the toilet to throw up and you were falling over. And they were doing fitness tests in this thing and it was just miserable. I was on the verge of tears the whole time. And then the depression came about and I didn't actually know I was depressed. And I think when you've never been depressed and it happens, you don't know. Am I
Yeah.
right with that? Like, I
Let's
mean,
talk a little bit about that. Because I think that that might be true, like that women don't realize they're depressed. Why do you think that is? Or what does that look like? Or what are the symptoms you think to be on the lookout for?
it's really hard, and it's even really hard now if I get those slumps, like,
Yes.
so we all get blue, right? And we can get depressed. It's a feeling, right? But depression isn't just a feeling. And I think that that was the difference, right? It wasn't just like that I didn't feel fine or I didn't feel happy. I had no energy. I had like a chronic fatigue that I couldn't lift. I wanted to sleep all the time. I lost my appetite. I lost loads of weight. I couldn't connect on a social level. I actually avoided going even to like the local book club. If it was 2 doors down from my house, a neighborhood book club, I would make excuses because I couldn't bear the idea of like me saying something in the book club and then nobody listening and then
Yes.
feeling rejected, because that was something
Yes.
I'd started to feel as well. I had no self-esteem. I felt as though that when I was saying things, it didn't matter anymore. There was lots of things connected. It wasn't just that I felt blue. I just felt as though a whole part of me had been removed, and then I was now stuck in this personality that I didn't recognize and I didn't think I was ever going to move out from. I thought
Yes.
maybe this is
It
me
feels
now.
hopeless, doesn't it? Like I've always
Yes,
said,
yes,
I
so
don't think that
hopeless.
I've ever like suffered from depression. I've suffered from situational depression as a result of like my panic attacks. But I was going for my gynecology appointment this last month, and I pulled up to the hospital, and I actually had remembered that I think it was like 5 years before that I was working as a curriculum director, because I'm a former school teacher. So I was working as a curriculum director, and I had this fantastic job and everything was fine at home. Like there was nothing going on really big in my life. And I started having, like, I don't even know how to explain it other than like, I just wanted to be home. I didn't want to be anywhere else. I just wanted to be home. So, like, when the work week would be over and then Friday night would come, I was like, oh, it's finally the weekend. I can just be home. But then on Saturday morning, I would wake up and I would start feeling anxious about having to go back to work on Monday morning. And I would get in my car and I would drive to work on Monday morning. And I just, I couldn't explain it. Like, I cried, and I didn't know why I was crying. I didn't know why I didn't want to go to work. I didn't know why I just wanted to stay home. And I remembered when I was at my gynecology appointment a couple of weeks ago, I drove by the back side of it, and I remembered pulling my car in there like 5 years ago and just sitting there and thinking like, I don't feel right. I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't know. Am I mentally unstable? Like, what is wrong with me? Because I can't, again, attach anything to how I'm feeling. I just don't want to go to work every day. I want to stay home. And I thought, my God, I sat in that car and just tried to talk myself into not going in those doors and being like, I don't know what's wrong with me. And, I'm just giving this as another example because you're talking about how your depression kind of manifested. And when I look back now, I think like that must have been some type of depression. I don't know exactly what was going on, but we know that this comes in many forms. But I also at the time was like so scared to even call it depression because like that's taboo. I don't want to think that I'm someone who suffers from depression or has ever suffered. Isn't that something? It's like we have these thing, like you said, it's like this inner feeling of unworthiness if we're
Well,
suffering that.
yeah, and exactly the same feelings. When the gynecologist said to me, you clearly have depression and I can help you with this as well as your other symptoms. I went to meet my husband afterwards for lunch, and he said, is everything okay? And I went, apparently I'm in perimenopause and that's why I've got depression and migraines. And my migraines were with aura, like vestibular. That's why I had all of these other sensations and no headache. And he went, oh my God, thank God, I thought you were going to leave me. And I went, well, I was actually, but I wasn't. But like, I actually was nearly at that point. And I think that, you know, I didn't know what was going on. How on earth could he know what was going on? How on earth could my children know what was going on? And so what we know about perimenopause is that depression and anxiety are some of the top symptoms that happen, right? And so the mental health aspect of perimenopause is not discussed enough. And normally women will go to the doctors and ask for help and be given antidepressants because the doctors want to treat the symptom and not the root cause, right? Where the root cause is the declining hormones, and that's the route that the doctor should take. And that's not happening, and that's another story. But you know, I had this conversation with my oldest boy, who I just mentioned earlier, who suffers from anxiety, which he manages, but has had depression in episodes as well. And he said to me, you know, I think it's really important from an autism spectrum disorder standpoint, that we remove the stigma around mental health, because, and this is at the time when I told him I had depression. There's a 14-year-old kid at the time. And he went, you know, and the reason is because he said it's like an invisible disability, and he says, and nobody can see it. And he said, if you had your leg chopped off and you were walking down the street with a limp, people would sympathize with you or empathize with you, because they'd see that you literally you needed a crutch, right? But you don't see it with a mental health aspect. And so when I decided I was going to talk about perimenopause, that was the reason I was really open about my mental health struggles, because I thought, I can't be ashamed of this if I have a child who has it too, and I'm embarrassed that I might need antidepressants, or I'm embarrassed to talk about it. So, and I do believe that even though we have made a lot of progress in removing the stigma, there are still a lot of ableist comments out there, you know, that are harmful and hurtful. And but we have to it's another thing, we have to keep chipping away at the conversation.
Yeah, you know, I think you're right. I think that we talk about it a whole lot more, but I still think that and maybe this is generations of cellular makeup that have followed us from one generation to another, but it's like we can talk about it, but we don't want to own it that it's happened to us, or like we still have shame around saying like, my life just feels really shitty right now, and it just sucks, and I don't know what's wrong, and I don't have any answers. Like, we're still so afraid, I think, to acknowledge that or to present that side of ourselves to others, and we keep it hidden. And then when we hide stuff, that's when shame comes into it all. And so I love that, that it's an invisible disability, and it is a disability because no one can see it. But I want to know, I want you to explain perimenopause, because one of the things that is a little shocking to me, and I think it's just, again, a lack of knowledge, which is why I was so excited to talk to you, is this started for you at age 42.
That's normal as well. Yeah. So it's really strange, like, because obviously going into perimenopause, I had the misconception, because I didn't know what it was. Obviously, when the doctor said perimenopause, and I'm like,
Yeah.
what's that?
Yeah, we don't know what that is, Amanda. Tell us what that is.
And so I assumed, like many, that, you go through menopause like you go through other things in your life, and you may have hot flashes and your period stop. That's what I thought would happen. And part of me was like, I actually can't wait for that. I'm not having any more kids. I'm sick of having a period. I can cope with being hot now and again. But it's far from that. In fact, that's such a simplified version of it. It's almost an insult to like think that way. So perimenopause, we know, can start in your late 30s. And actually, if I go back to when I had my last child, I was 38, and I never felt good after that as far as my menstrual cycle was concerned. I never had like any PMS or anything like that before. And then I'd start getting really exhausted, and then I'd have real bad histamine problems. That's another issue with perimenopause. So from
histamine, like allergy and congestion and all of that.
Yeah,
Okay.
Lots of women start getting histamine issues, and it can be awful. I mean, allergies are awful, but I would get them if I like touched a Christmas tree. I'd get like a rash running up my face, and my skin would break out in these itchy rashes. And anyway, so perimenopause, we know, it can start in the late 30s, and it can last on average 8 to 10 years. So some women go on for longer than that. I was about 8 years for mine. And it's when progesterone and estrogen start to decline. Estrogen doesn't decline in a linear fashion. It's sort of all over the place, like whack-a-mole crazy. And so that's why the symptoms come and go and fluctuate and feel bad sometimes and not so bad other times, because there's no rhyme, no reason to how you're going to react. And some women still have periods, some women stop their periods, or they become irregular. Like there's no one size fits all for perimenopause. And women usually find that perimenopause is the worst part for them. It's the most symptomatic. Estrogen receptors are all over the body. They're in our joints, they're in our gut, they cross our blood-brain barrier, they protect our heart, so there's amongst other things. And so women might start getting heart palpitation, joint ache, gut issues, they get brain fog, think they're having like an episode of Alzheimer's. And
yes,
and then there's all of these mental health issues that come with them, and they're a direct consequence of falling hormones. And so what happens is a woman will go through these things and maybe have like one symptom. Like for me, it was vertigo and nausea. And so I got sent to an ear, nose, throat doctor and a neurologist. I didn't get sent to a gynecologist. Now, and one of the reasons is primary caregivers and GPs, I don't know what you call them over here, do not get any menopause training at all in medical school. It doesn't exist. Now, gynecologists or OB-GYNs who go through their training have to actually select to do menopause management training, and only 20% of those students do that. So even if you get a referral to a gynecologist, they might have never done any menopause training. And I've spoken to some of these doctors and they'll say, yeah, all of the focus is on pregnancy and puberty, pregnancy and postpartum. We don't learn about menopause. And it's a real disservice to women that there's a huge gaping gap in the
medical that should be like required, I think.
There's 51% of the population are women. 80% of those will struggle with menopause symptoms. And then after this, right, so then we go through perimenopause, we reach menopause, which is 12 months without a menstrual cycle.
Okay.
You can no longer reproduce and you're menopausal. It's almost like a date stamp, right? Only you never know when it is, but you basically haven't had a period. And then from anything from that time forward, you're considered to be postmenopausal or menopausal, right? So you're menopausal until the day you die. It's not something that goes away. So you're in a state that's menopausal. And so your body now is without estrogen, or a very low threshold, I should say, and very low thresholds of progesterone. And what we know is that these are, especially the estrogen, is a protective hormone. Told you it's around the heart and the joints and the bones. Now, what we know is that women struggle with osteoporosis. 1 in 2 women will break a bone that are postmenopausal, and that's a direct consequence of lack of estrogen. Cardiovascular disease is our biggest killer. The estrogen protects the cardiovascular system. We know that Alzheimer's is a bigger problem for postmenopausal women than it is for men. And so all of these things become the diseases that kill us are usually because we're lacking in these hormones. And so it's super important that women know that, so that they can do proactive things to help their health as they're older. You know,
yeah,
like
let's talk about that. Well, first of all, I want to our audience who are, I know, to our audience who are listening to this, I think one of the most helpful things you've said is, if you think you are experiencing this and you're struggling and you're not able to get any answers, see if your like the gynecologist has that training. And if not, perhaps find one that does. Is that a good recommendation?
So it's, yes, definitely. And if your audience is mainly in North America, there is a North American Menopause Society. And if you go to menopause.org, there is something you can select there called find a specialist or find a provider by putting in your zip code, and it'll list all of the gynecologists and doctors that have done their menopause training. And hopefully you'll have like someone there who can help you. And then there are a couple of like telemedicine organizations out there now. One which I love is called Geneve, which is GENNEV, Geneve.com.
Okay.
And you pay a fee. I don't know if it's like something like $35 for a video conference with a menopause specialist who can issue a prescription that you can then usually claim via your insurance. So
Yeah, I'll drop those in the show notes for you all who are
yeah,
listening.
yeah.
Okay, so that's one of the things that they can do. But let's talk, because I'm sure everybody's listening. They're like, okay, we need to know what the hell we can do to help ourselves. So like do you promote, like, do you think getting on hormones is the answer? Like what are the answers here?
Okay, I mean, that's a big question with lots of answers for
It
this one.
is, I know.
So I'll try and be succinct, and I'm not very good at that because I'm a bit of a talker. But the first thing is if you don't feel like yourself and you're within the age range, you can probably assume that you're perimenopausal. And from a medical perspective, if you're over 40, and you're starting to have symptoms that you don't recognize as part of your regular life, and a menopause specialist looks at you, they can do blood work that can sort of give them an idea, because 40 is sort of tends to be on the younger side. But if you're over 45 and you go to a menopause specialist with your symptoms, they don't even need to do any blood work. They can diagnose you based on symptoms, because there's an assumption that you are. Now, as far as treatment options are concerned, it really is down to you, choice, and what's available. Now, in the book, I have a whole section that's like,
Oh yes. Let's tell them the name of the book right now, because I'll drop that too. But we
I
haven't
don't know if
even
you video. It's Menopocalypse. Menopocalypse. Yeah, it's like the apocalypse. Menopocalypse, how I learned to thrive through menopause and how you can too. And so for me, the number one thing you need to do is become educated, because you cannot go to a doctor's appointment without knowing what the hell is going on, because they're likely not going to know what the hell is going on. And so if you feel as though your quality of life is impacted by the symptoms that you're struggling with, then the first line treatment that doctors should offer you is hormone therapy. And hormone therapy is micro doses of estrogen. And if you still have your uterus, you need to have progesterone to protect your uterus. It's, if you're somebody who's ever used birth control pill, it's like 100 times less than that. Like, it's a super small dose. And what it can do for women is it can sort of level that hormonal playing field. And I would literally avoid anyone that says it can balance your hormones, because from an endocrinology standpoint, and I've interviewed many experts, that's not possible. The idea that you can balance hormones, which literally fluctuate every second, is a misdemeanor. But what it can do is, we know estrogen is going to fall in a fluctuating manner. We know progesterone is going to fall in a more linear fashion. And by supplementing your body with these hormones, it can just calm shit down, right? And it can make women feel almost human again, and be able to do the things that they can control, which is, looking at their nutrition and their exercise and stress management and all the things that we have a little bit more of a handle on. And so
is this a cream though? Is this like a cream that you put on, Amanda?
So hormone therapy can come in lots of different applications. So, and remember, I'm not a doctor, right? But this chapter in my book was written with a Harvard-educated menopause specialist, right? So it isn't just my words. This is what the current medical standard is. But you need to know there are actually no prescription guidelines in the USA at all, and they probably never will be. But hormone therapy, estrogen can come in a transdermal fashion, which means it can be applied through the skin, and that comes in gels, creams, and patches. And progesterone needs to be taken orally in order for the uterus to create a lining that protects it against any sort of like uterine cancer. It can also be inserted vaginally, right? So you can also take oral estrogens. They're not, they're sort of maybe considered to be the older forms of HRT, but they're still valid and they still work. And it really just depends on, a lot of the times in the US, what your insurance will cover you for, right? Now, one of the things I like to talk about though is regulated versus unregulated hormones. So if you're on I find this such a complicated topic in the US because of the way the medical system is, and the fact that people don't have insurance and they're on Medicare. And so it's really important to know that there's lots of options out there. But if you're a woman who wants to have hormone therapy, the FDA have approved about 30 different types of hormone therapy that's covered by your insurance mostly. I mean, it depends on the nuances within your program. But like, for example, the one I'm on costs me $6 a month. It's not an expensive product, right? And I have a patch that I put on, and I take an oral progesterone pill. And you may need to fiddle about with different ones with your doctor until you find something that works for you. And chances are, if you have perimenopause for 8 to 10 years, your dosages are going to change as your symptoms change, right? So I think you have to be flexible going into this. Now, what happened is there are lots of private clinics out there that offer unregulated products, and they market them as being like bioidentical or natural, and that's the ones that women should take. So I'll just want to sort of like break that down a little bit. So bioidentical is a marketing term that literally means that the hormones mimic the ones that are within the same as your body. And so they're usually mixed up in a compound in pharmacy. So they take regulated drugs, they separate them and mix them with sawdust or whatever, and then give you like this supposedly personalized hormone product. Now, there's a couple of problems there. First of all, the minute that you take a regulated hormone that's FDA approved and then change the variables, it's no longer covered you for its safety and its efficacy. And you want to be taking drugs that we know are safe, right? The second thing is these are never covered by the insurance, and they'll usually cost women hundreds a month, hundreds. And the bioidentical hormones that are offered by these compounding pharmacies and private clinics are derived from yams. Okay, so what happens is they go through a process in a lab where they extract something from the yam and they break it down through a chemical process, and it mimics the estrogen in your body. The FDA regulated bioidentical hormones are exactly the same thing. They're exactly the same. So why, and this is why I get really mad about it, because if I think that somebody is paying $500 for hormones that you can get for $6 that are regulated for efficacy and safety and gone through all the testing and even have a black box warning for you, then you need to take those and not the ones that.
So are you saying, because I don't know hardly anything about this, so are you saying that all bioidentical hormones, are all of those made in private compounding pharmacies? And you're no. So
that's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is bioidentical is a marketing term.
Okay.
A marketing term that means that the hormones are almost identical to the body, and they're derived from yams. And so it's being marketed in the way that it's natural. But what I'm saying to you is you don't need to go to a private clinic to get the unregulated version of those. You can get the exact same thing regulated from a medical professional and covered on your insurance. So I'm just trying to say to women, don't pay out of pocket hundreds of dollars when you don't need to, right?
Do they call like the hormones you get from your doctor, do they call those bioidentical?
They do. And so I think just as it's a super complicated field, and it's like a navigation minefield. So over here, they do call them bioidentical, but they call them regulated bioidentical.
Okay. So we want you, the audience members, to make sure you're getting the regulated hormones that have been approved by the FDA. And so be very cautious when you go down that.
And I'll tell you one of the reasons why is because sometimes these compounding pharmacies will issue a progesterone and a cream version to go with the estrogen and it's all in one package. And what they're finding is that the progesterone that's applied transdermally through the skin is not enough to protect the woman's uterus from uterine cancer. And so there's been some higher risks of cancer using those. And in addition to that, women are offered pellets, hormone pellets that get injected into your butt for 3 months. And they're also posing to be a high risk of cancer risk because the dosages are so high. And so if you don't believe me or you're offended by anything I'm saying, one, I've done my research, I know what's out there. Two, go to some of the FDA sites, go to the Menopause Society website and actually read what they've got to say about them. They're standing out against it because there's a safety issue around there, and why would you put yourself at risk?
Yeah, and you have an entire chapter in your book that explains all of this. Is that right?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, that's really helpful too, because I think a lot of people who are listening are probably, this is new information for them. And so they may have a lot of questions. I love that you're calling that out, because these are just things that we do not know. And marketers, they send us down kind of this trajectory that we completely kind of buy into sometimes.
And
And
so
so,
you did ask about like, I was a really long answer and we got sidetracked. You did ask about like other things. So I'll just go like through it. So we also know that like antidepressants are usually overprescribed for menopause, but in some cases, hormone therapy might not be applicable for not every woman. Not every woman can take it, and not every woman likes it or likes the way it feels. There are other pharmaceutical options that have off-label benefits, that anti-seizure and antidepressants, that off-label benefits help with some of the symptoms. And there are also some alternative therapies out there like ashwagandha and shishandra and black cohosh, and these are all like herbal alternatives. The problem is they're not highly tested, and so they might work for you, they might not work at all, and they're not rigorously tested. And so right now there isn't a real great alternative out there. Some women might try these herbal options and feel a little bit of benefit. I mean, it's a little bit like that's again another unregulated business, the supplement business. But and then so basically, so we have the symptoms and we have the medical options that are available, but then you're sort of still left with a whole lot of things that you can sort of tangibly do yourself. And so there might be times where, like me, you were sat on the sofa for 4 hours a day and you don't do anything, and that's fine. But there's going to be moments of glimmers of light, moments where you can sort of take action that are going to sort of like proactively bulletproof you for aging and for postmenopause, right? And that's sort of what I did in the book. I talked about what's happening, and this is what we know. And then I tell people in the second part of the book some strategies that they can do to sort of take hold and do things that are just going to make them feel better, improve their mental health, their physical health, without confusion, right? Because there's a lot of confusion out there about what you should do through menopause, right?
and you give nutrition options and as well as exercise options. Is that right?
I broke it down into 4 parts. I have how to eat, and what to eat is one of the chapters.
Okay.
And so I talk about like what the body needs to function, and how to nourish the body, and how to recognize body signals and cues so that you don't overeat, and you recognize what real hunger is. Try to move away from the like diet culture type message that's out there, because we know that eating disorders peak in menopause again, like they do in teenage girls. There's definitely a hormone relation. In the exercise, the second chapter is about exercise, and I talk about the benefits of daily movement, not just like strength working out, but like getting outside and walking, your mental health and your physical health markers. And then I have a 12-week strength training program in there, because aging and menopause need us to do strength training. We can talk about that if you want later. And then the third part is stress management and sleep. We already talked about our mental health struggles, but estrogen is intrinsically connected with other hormones in the body. 2 of those are insulin and cortisol. And so a lot of women really struggle to get down from that like high cortisol level, and feel stressed all the time and don't have coping mechanisms, and it also impacts their sleep. And so they might be doing everything else right, but if they're not sleeping and they're highly stressed all the time, they're never going to feel great. They're never going to be able to get their weight management like under control, and just like actually feel like energized, right?
Yeah.
And then the last chapter is how to think, and I call it Shift Happens. And I wanted to like really fun. I thought it was
That's
funny.
good.
I saw this on a roadside poster when I was driving in the car once, and I'm like, I'm going to use that because it made me laugh. But I worked with a psychologist on this one, and it literally is trying to change the narrative about aging, how we age, what it means to us, and why women put themselves on the back shelf all the time when it comes to like the workplace, the family, society. And so I'd like to change that story too.
Oh, I love that. I have a quote that I use all the time that's like you're not selfish for putting yourself first. Like you're not. So I love that you're addressing that piece too for women.
It's self-preservation. And I think that it's not something that's woo-woo. Like when I used to hear self-care all the time, I'd like throw up a little bit in my mouth and go, oh God, I hate that term. But I think if we consider it as something that's an essential and not something that's frivolous or like luxurious or exotic in some way.
Yeah. One of my friends calls it self-loyalty.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. I like that.
Yeah.
But the message for me through menopause is it's hard, right? But we can do hard things, and there is a sort of light at the end of the tunnel. You know, things start to calm down, and like menopause, post menopause, and it's an opportunity if you start making these small changes that by the time you come to the stage where things are calming down a bit, you've already got these good habits in place, you've already got the mindset nailed, and like your podcast, you said it's called She Finds Joy. Like if you're not doing stuff that fills you with joy as you're aging, you're missing a big part of the puzzle. It's literally the thing you should be aiming for. It's like
Oh,
should be your goal.
see, and I love that. And I think you're right. I think we do get these societal messages like, and I don't know if this is maybe going off topic a little bit, but like one of the things that is like I know it sounds silly, but it really is like a deep fear of mine is, oh, well, once you hit 40, you're going to pack on the pounds and you're going to get all that belly fat. And that's just part of the aging process. And so it's like, I have fear around that. I don't want to have a lot of belly fat, but I also struggle. Like I'm great at the exercise thing, Amanda. I've got that sucker down. I mean, I run 35, 40 miles a week. I do spin class. I do yoga. I'm going to check out your book because I would like to add the strength training in there more. I need to do a better job of that, but it's the nutrition side of things that I need to do a much better job with. And I don't want to just be like, oh, I'm just, this is what happens when it's 40. It's just part of the life thing. You're just going to start feeling sore all the time and your body's going to hurt and you're going to have belly fat and you're not going to be able to do the things I hate that storyline. I hate that narrative.
Well, the fact that you've already saying that probably means that you're going to do stuff proactively to stop it happening, right? But I was on Instagram the other day and I saw a post that I loved, and it was from somebody who said along the lines of, I'm tired of hearing about women who are people. It wasn't just women, but in our conversation, it's quite often women who lose belief in their athletic ability, that once they're 30, 40, 50, they stop because they consider themselves over the hill. And the fact is, if you're stopping at 30 and 40, you're probably only halfway through your life and you've given up. And so, the showing up bit matters, right? And like that, I've had conversations with women and it's like, I can't. And they're stuck in this narrative of no progress. They will never ever have progress if they don't shift from that negative mindset.
Yeah.
And I know it's hard, right? I've been there. Like I'm now postmenopausal. I've been in the crappy, ugly part of it, and I felt desperate, and I felt like I'm never going to be fit and healthy again. But there are definite ways you can make changes that can shift the way that your mind thinks. And I also think, Kim, that it's okay to hold on to a little bit of vanity. Like, I know that it's really hard for you to admit, I don't want to get a fat belly. And it's like, we're not fat shaming in any way, but it's actually just that, I'm quite happy the way I am. I don't want it to change.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. But I think it is changing a little bit because I need to do a better job with my eating habits.
I know. And so there's two things you can do there. You can do things proactively to help with like the physical side of that. But then there's also the conversation you have as well. That if it does happen, how hard are you going to be on yourself? Are you going to have like this negative conversation that makes you hate yourself? No.
Yes. Yes.
So it's like, that's when I wrote the book, I was trying to write it in a holistic manner, meaning I want all of the bits of the jigsaw puzzle to build this really solid picture that you don't just look at exercise, you don't just look at nutrition, you also have the conversation about self-worth.
Yeah, it's that holistic. And I'm chuckling inside because you wouldn't know this, but Amanda, as we're talking about the whole belly thing, I reach down. This is one of the things I've noticed I've done is I reach down and I like pull my underwear up because I can't stand if my underwear falls below like where there is a little more cushion. It feels much better if it's just encompassed like within like the band around my hand. So I'm just laughing because as we're talking about it, I'm becoming self-conscious of it. But I love your holistic approach. I definitely want to get your book. We will put the book in the show notes, but it sounds like it's you've done your heavily invested research So you come from a scientific background, which I appreciate. I think we can blow fluff up people's asses all day long. And I'm not into fluff. I'm into, let's make sure that we're choosing to do things that we know are backed by science, but also that we can create that belief within ourselves that this does not have to be our narrative.
Well, one of the things is that, like nutrition science and exercise science, when it gets down to the nuts and bolts, gets a little bit confusing. People don't need to know about the ATP energy system and the Krebs cycle and things that will make their eyes roll. But what they do want is they want to know the why. And so I offer that, but I offer that in a way that's really palatable. Like, I really struggled in menopause to read the heavy medical notes. I really did. And I used to have to get somebody else to read them with me because I couldn't retain it and I couldn't absorb it. So I wrote the book that I would want to have read when I was in the worst part of my perimenopause,
Yes.
which was something that was easy to read.
Yes. And I have this thing with books, as you can see behind me here. I am a total book lover, but I'm going to have to get a signed copy because I have this thing that if I know the author,
I
then.
have to tell you, I thought you were sent a copy, so I'm going to send you one after the show for sure.
Well, wait a minute.
No.
I did have one of my podcasters send me a copy of a book. Well, I'm going to have to look and make sure because I'm a book fiend. So I'll look and let you know.
Yeah.
And you better have signed it if you did.
No, I'm quite sure I didn't, because I have to send them out personally. So, but no, I'll get you a signed copy anyway. That's fine. But yeah, and I think that one of the things in my whole overall message, and it's obviously similar to yours, is that I want to give women hope, right? I don't want them to be like, yes, you may get a fat belly, and there's actually a scientific reason for that happening. And so some belly fat isn't such a bad thing. When it's too much a problem, though, when it becomes a problem for your health. But if you have an idea of what's happening and you actually understand the physiological processes of menopause, then maybe you won't be so hard on yourself when you do have to tuck it in.
Right. I love that. And I feel that just in this interview here today, I feel that you are on such a mission minded, trajectory here with really wanting to help give women who are suffering and in the throes of this, there's hope and there's light and there's things that you can do to proactively be involved in this and not just chuck it up to the doctor who said this is what it is and that's not working.
Yeah.
So I'm going to drop all of your social links in the show notes, but I do want you to, just for the listeners, to tell people where they can find more information and connect with you.
I would just tell them to head to my website, which is fitandchips.com, which is FITN chips, fitandchips.com, and then they can access everything from there. My social, my menopause community, etc. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. This conversation, I feel like this needs to be like a 4 or 5 part series, to be honest, because I know I made you rush through pieces and I want to dig deeper on some of that, but the book is going to be super, super helpful too. So thank you so much for sharing your story and your vulnerability and just kind of giving us some hope with how we can navigate this as women.
Yeah. Thank you, Kim. And thanks for having me on the show. Keep doing it. I love what you're doing.
You're welcome.